So hello, and thank you all for being here, both in person as well as on the live stream. To all those out at the pool live streaming, wish I was with you all. So today I get an opportunity to talk to you about the journey of innovation. And the reason I picked this topic is when I had the opportunity of speaking to a group of diverse experts in a multitude of different fields, I thought it was a little bit challenging to come up with a topic that would be able to speak to everyone here and each person here, given the breadth of knowledge that's already out there. But what I discovered is that my particular position in this process, in this journey, is a bit unique because I'm still in the middle. I'm not one of those individuals who's famous on the billboards with quotes that are quoted. I am also not at the very beginning of the trip where I'm wondering what on earth is going on. I'm just somewhere in the middle, and so I think I have enough information that I can share both through personal experience as well as the Easter eggs that I might have found along the way. But I hope I can share some insight with you. Laying some of the ground rules. My goal is to have at least one slide, concept or quote that each of you can pull away from this talk. But given the breadth of information, just focus in on one. So if people need to scurry out a little bit here or there, I count that as a win. You guys got your nugget of information early, and you're going to squirrel it away. But in all seriousness, as we go through this, if there's any particular group that I missed or a particular topic that's really important that you think that I need to focus on, please do see me afterwards because there's going to be a slide with your name on it for the next topic and the next speech that I get. If anybody is practicing their sleep hygiene, which I know is very important, no worries, just make sure that your badge is flipped in such a way that you don't become a meme. So, when I was asked, and I would like to thank the International Forum on Advancements in Healthcare for the opportunity to speak to you today, as well as the Visionary Award that I was able to receive. When I discovered that I was giving the keynote speech in Las Vegas, no less, I really practiced hard on my announcing voice and brushed up on my gambling knowledge. The standard disclaimers, which kind of go along with anything, but on the journey of innovation, these become important because, lo and behold, I'm standing up here in front of everyone and representing no one. No one will claim me up here. I represent no agency, none of my official titles. They all really like to pat you on the back when you've had a success. Not entirely certain exactly where they are on the entire messy process of coming up with innovations and advancements along the way. But they're there. The ideas that I'm expressing are my personal opinions. I have the right to change them, sometimes even in mid-sentence. More importantly, from a regulatory perspective, there are a number of different devices and so forth that I may talk about that are in a variety of different stages. Consider them all prototypes and consider them all nothing that can be marketed or sold. I couldn't sell you anything if I wanted to. And I do not promote nor have a particular preference for any goods or services, purely coincidental. So, jumping in also on conflicts of interest. One of the things that I discovered when I first had the opportunity to listen to the lectures is from the very first lecture, all of these slides became obsolete. And they're all going to need to be edited. And so we're going to edit them along the way as we go through this. But the first thing I noticed is that there was a trend towards migration away from Chief Medical Officer, which you'll see is one of my hats up here, to Chief Health Officer. So just that one switch of words is important because we know that the words that we choose to use are not just impacting the communication that we have amongst each other, but they're also the part of that internal monologue. It's how we think about things. And if we don't work hard to ensure that the words we are picking to think about are optimized for what we're choosing to do, we're not going to necessarily get down the pathway we want. But so the good news is if any of you got one of my business cards out there, there may be some changes coming along, put it in a shoebox, you have a first edition. But in terms of changing words, this is one of those things that I'd like to change on that slide. And this one happens to be canned, but by just changing that one word from conflict to confluence, you have the heart of what it means to achieve innovation and the tools that you need to accomplish that. Because for too long, we've been in conflict with each other, one way or the other, arm wrestling and competing over grants and resources and whatnot. And in a field like healthcare, this is not healthy. And we have seen from any number of the different speakers up here, I'm preaching to the choir. Everybody recognizes that. But with one simple word change, I can take all of these disparate groups that I work with and that I try to connect. I can't do all of this unless I'm doing it in my head anyway, unless I'm coordinating and cooperating and collaborating. But this should be something that is recognized by everybody, and this is an important first step in your innovative journey, is taking what you already do, what you're already an expert at, and starting to make those important links, those important networks. And I thank you for the opportunity to meet all of the wonderful individuals that are helping me do that from this conference. So this is going to be a relatively bold statement, because I'm going to tell you that the innovative process actually follows a scientific method-ish, and that it's something that can at least be controlled or described in an organized manner. Despite what my speech may sound like, there's a pathway that can constrain and to organize it. It follows a predictable pattern of rules, which we'll get into, and you can practice, you can actually get better at it, and you can learn from your past experiences. So it's wonderful news. The other wonderful thing about innovation is that, and this is why I like this particular graph, is for those nerds and those non-nerds in the audience, or actually I should say the non-biomedical nerds in the audience, this is actually the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle. And what this basically does in a nutshell is this particular chemical pathway generates energy for the body. And it takes these molecules into this cycle and it transforms them. They have a great amount of potential energy that come in, and with each one of these steps, it generates fuel for the body. But the wonderful thing about this particular analogy, just like innovation, is that you take your own individual potential energy and your own expertise, and you can hop in on this cycle at any point. You can take that and generate and go all the way through. The other nice thing is that every one of these molecules is just a little bit different. Just like each one of us has our own particular specialty, it doesn't matter. You can hop in on this cycle. And eventually, you get back around to the beginning. And when you reach the beginning again, it's either because you really succeeded or you really failed. But either way, you become a mentor to usher that next new molecule into the system, that next person that you otherwise can talk to and shepherd through the process. And the whole thing becomes that much better because your experience is so important. So from the scientific method, let's go ahead and start with observations. It's a good place to start. From an observation perspective, when you take a look at innovations or advancements, especially in the healthcare system, it looks like a disorganized mess. Seeming set of random occurrences, events, got things going here and there. Heck, even the quote is from some draft that was online. But then you change or highlight just one word. And suddenly, it becomes clear that that one seemingly word is enough to help us organize and recognize it in a different light. It helps us change our perspective. And so from observations, that is, you hear about people who say, you think like an innovator, you think like an inventor. And some of that is a different perspective on how we observe the world around us. We see things in the world, not just as they are, but how they could be. You have so much potential. And it works whether the person has positive potential or they have a whole lot of room to grow. So you can use that phrase either way. It's a great canned phrase. I happen to be an emergency physician with an expertise in EMS and disaster, and so it's been a busy year and a half. But one of the things that we talk about with my specialty is situational awareness. You have to be aware not just of where you are, but what's coming in front of you, what's down the road, what types of things are having an impact on your current focus. And your observations are what's going to help you do that. Your observations are only as good as the tools that you're using. And every single one of us brings with us a biased set of tools and a biased set of observations. We each have our own limitations. We have a different communication style. We have a different way of looking at things, a different perspective. And it's important, but what's also important is to recognize that in the scientific process, there are inherent biases in the entirety of the system. The types of things that are trendy and cool happen to get the most press. The things that are more successful or the positive hypotheses or the positive results may be the things that get the most published. You have to be willing to look at things a little bit differently in order to see those nuggets of information that are important, especially when you're trying to do something new that hasn't been done before. One of my favorites on here is you tell a story. For those folks that are interested in science fiction, I love telling stories. I love creating stories, and part of the story is, what if the idea that I have were realized in the world? What would that look like? And if you can tell a story that people will listen to and sit down and engage with and understand or maybe read, you have accomplished something because you've given those engineers that happen to look at that, even if you don't take it any further than that wonderful story, you've given a roadmap for some engineer to develop the next flip phone or the next ingenious idea several years down the road when they pull that up and decide, aha, I can do something with that. Let's take a look at some of the tools that we use for observation in healthcare. And this is a slide, this is one of those other slides that I'm going to have to edit. And in a good way, because how many folks here just really love the current pain scale? For anybody who's in a clinical world, we go to the patient, Ms. Jones, on a scale from 0 to 10, with 0 being no pain at all and 10 being the worst possible pain you could imagine, how much pain are you in here in the emergency department? A 10. Okay. So here's some pain medications. I'll be back in a little while. We'll see how things are going. A few minutes later, Mrs. Jones, how bad is your pain now? Oh, it's a little bit better, Doc. Thank you so much for the pain medicine, but it's still a 10. Could I get some more? Okay. Come back a little later. So how is it now? Oh, so much better, Doc. My pain's gone, and I'm ready to go. So thank you, Mrs. Jones, for joining us. We're glad we could fix your problem, and now we have another scale for you to do. And this is going to be that satisfaction scale. So on a scale from 0 to 10, how would you describe the service that you received during your visit to this emergency department? And one of the things that I'd like to point out is that on this 10-point scale, there's not 10 points on this scale, there's 2. Because on the satisfaction survey, all of us are under this impression that unless you are the best, unless you have the top-notch marks, the rest of the information is useless or it's considered a fail. And I think that's terrible from a healthcare perspective where we have a patient-centered and patient-focused idea. How are we ignoring all of those opportunities for change by considering anything outside of perfect a fail? And on the other hand, we have an entire group of population that believes that in order to get the care they want, they have to scream, holler, and stamp their feet and say it's an 11 or a 10 out of 10 pain in order to accomplish that. That doesn't lead to good scientific results. And so this is where we get a chance to edit the slides, because there's a doctor out there, Dr. Milantic, did I get it? Anyway, yes, who basically has a tool out there that takes this same thing and actually has 8 different points of reference in a far broader scale that can get at the heart of not just the pain, but a lot of other components that are integral into both the satisfaction and the well-being and the health of the patient. And so I get a chance to put a solution up here after meeting with somebody during this conference that I cannot wait until we can implement and I can start using for my patients. So kudos to those groups. We also need to build better observation tools in healthcare arena, and there's a few options for that. One is our communication can be really, really bad. We have a disparate group of phone calls and pagers and electronic medical records. We have all these different things, and you get lost in the noise. Our medical record system is often based upon billing and coding and so forth, but there's so much noise you can't tell what's important. You can't get at the crux of what you're trying to communicate. And with that comes loss and waste and problems. So what if there were a solution out there somewhere that had a method of consolidating some of those disparate ideas and have them patient-centered, patient-focused, with only the information you need, with none of the extra noise, and did a little bit of multimedia and all the other ways that we try to communicate with it. Different type of observation tool, there are solutions out there that can do that. The Patient Safety Organization is another wonderful opportunity mirrored off of the FAA protections for near misses in flight. And this is a chance to have a protected environment where you can talk about both near misses as well as errors in the medical arena in a safe and effective way, so that not only can you get at the root analysis of the individual incidents, but you can also report it to a database. So those never events and those rare events that may never pop up are part of a database that somebody can take a look at and say, 6% of the population is finding this. How can we improve that? It is an observation tool that we desperately need people to participate in so that we can get at those never events and try to keep them in a... Let's take a look at some of the artificial intelligence. How many of those researchers out there have a remarkable amount of data that they just may not be able to mine properly to get at the key pieces that are so important for the patient care? There are tools out there and companies out there that can take that healthcare data and truly mash through it and get to what's really important. And we should start looking at those. And then that active listening. So when we do that survey and somebody gives us a 7 and they do a few comments, or when we have some of that input that's coming back, we really need to be active in that listening, and those active action reports need to lead to meaningful changes. Otherwise, it's just a waste of more people's time. So the state of healthcare, as we know, has a lot of challenges. There's a whole list of things here that everybody here, or at least one speaker, has touched upon. I'm preaching to the choir. We have room for improvement, which is wonderful for us innovators because it gives us the opportunity to get our teeth in something real that we can make a meaningful difference. From my personal journey, and this is where I get into the specific examples that happen to bring me here today, about a year and a half ago, as one of the ER docs, both looking at the news as well as listening to many of my colleagues, I start hearing about this respiratory distress and this terrible shortage that we're facing and a surge of patients with respiratory illness related to that COVID-19. And I start seeing a series of articles come through about this ventilator shortage. And I say, I know something about ventilators. I'm going to look a little bit more into this. So my observation tools allowed me to take a look at that and try to come up with the next step. So what's the next step? So first is observation. Second thing you need to do is you need to research. You need to take that observations and you need to hone it and confine it around an area of interest. So you need to take a look at those ventilators, that you need to take a look at that topic. But the other thing that you can do, and this is a trick that I learned, is that you can look at some of the old data, some of the null data, some of the null hypotheses, some of the data out there that did not support a meaningful difference in mortality, and say, does this apply currently? Is this meaningful now, or have we changed enough of the medicine and enough of the tools that we have to take that person who might have made it out of the emergency department and into the ICU but still died? Can we take them even farther if we take a second look at some of those old studies? The other thing that's important, and this is wearing my disaster medical hat, is you need to split the medicine from the logistics. And when you do that, things become so much more clear, because the medicine doesn't change a ton. But what does change is available resources that you have, and we see it change either rapidly or slowly. And as those logistics change, we need to match the best types of tools and the best things that we have to optimize the care that we can provide for our patients. And when we split it this way, in addition to having meaningful changes in the distribution and the different supply chains for the logistics, we also have that situational awareness that it's not the medicine that's changed. And so when these logistical things change back, we have some earlier indications of when we can pivot back and provide more normalized care to those same patients that we serve. And without that feedback loop, we can get lost or stuck in a pattern that's not healthy. Back to my personal journey. Okay, so we have ventilator shortages. We have individuals that are being handed bag valve masks and family members bagging their own family members. What can we do meaningfully with what we have? So what's already there? We have those automatic bag squeezers, the ventilator splitters. We've got all of the production of the multinational corporations all building whatever they can to provide both PPE as well as ventilator components. Whatever, you name it, somebody was on it. Somebody was looking at it. And then you have the Harry Diamond Labs from 1960 with a coordinated program with NASA. Hello, what's this? So by taking a deeper dive into the area that you're looking at, our group of engineers, advocates, and some specialty folks were able to take a look at some of this and actually convinced an archivist at a museum to send us the prototype. If that doesn't tell you how desperate everybody was at the time and how willing people were to help, nothing will. Willing to actually part with this original device for us to take a look at. And what we noticed is that a 1960 technology called fluidics was something that was able to, without any circuits and no electricity, was able to provide some of those components that we thought might be helpful in this arena. But we weren't sure. But we had an idea, and with that idea and that hypothesis, let's take a look at some of the what-ifs. So we have our observations, we've had our focused observations, we've done our deep dive, now let's take a look at the hypotheses. And this is where you're allowed to be about half bubble off normal. And everybody here in the room that I've met is, and those that haven't, you're a half bubble off normal because you're here. But from a hypothesis perspective, you want to have that broad differential diagnosis. You want to take a look at it from every different angle you can think of. You want to look for the zebras. You want to look for those uncommon types of things. And while you can focus on the low-hanging fruit and optimize those areas that are the most likely, absolutely. But you don't want to miss the subtleties. Because remember, in the innovation realm, 90% of what you're going to do is fail. And that is okay to fail in this arena, and that's what's so important is it's not truly a fail. It may be something that particular project didn't work, but all of the information that you've gained, remember that cycle is one step closer to generating new energy, meeting new people, and coming up with a new solution. You also absolutely want to carry the positives with you. And I know one of our individuals here, our celebrities, is great for some of her quotes, and she spoke before. I would love to have a quote for this slide. I'm still waiting for one of those. But as you progress, it is so important to recognize that those type of tools that you bring with you are built very often in an early age. Explorers never get lost. They just don't know where they are sometimes. And I thank my dad for telling me that because I've been lost so many times. What if we could actually take that same fluidic technology and invent a 3D printable, mass-produced, no electricity, no moving parts, compact pocket-sized device, and oh, by the way, let's go ahead and add that newfangled lung protective ventilation to it. What if we could actually do that? I can't do that. I'm a doctor. I'm running ragged trying to take care of patients, but I know what I'm looking for. And so this is where you assemble your team. This is where you take a look at what you have, what you bring to the table, and find those integral partners in this process. Don't be somebody you're not. Find somebody who does that well. Partner up with them and say, aha, it is wonderful to meet you. I know nothing about that. Please come help me build this. And over time, you're going to build your team, and that team is going to be valuable no matter what project you're working on. Build that trusted team. And I can happily say that between the patient advocates, the clinicians, the researchers, and our crack team of engineers that know more about how the inner workings of our devices, we have a wonderful team. And now comes the tougher part. So now you've got the team, so you've got all the way this far, and now comes the grind. You can't get away from the grind. What do you mean that there's no CAD program or other type of scenario that will tell you how this works? There's no computer design. This predated any computers. So our poor engineers, round the clock between the United States and over in South Africa, had to go through the process of making thousands of devices and making incremental changes and then testing each and every device to finally come up with something that worked up the snuff of what Dr. Froelke thought might be appropriate for his patients. They had a lot of work to do. So, when you think you might have a winner, aha, we've come up with 1,001 device, we think this is it. This is where you have the opportunity to get in front of it early. Start off early with the marketing. Start off early with the pats on the back. You deserve it. 90% of the stuff doesn't work. Take this opportunity for your health and well-being to say, I did it, and help move forward. And I would love to thank this wonderful forum for the opportunity to brag about the wonderful work that my team has been able to do, and to hear about everyone's projects here that have come so far and have brought them here. Every single encounter, no matter how challenging it is, because remember, the house always wins. Your agency is going to bet against you. 90% of the stuff fails, so everybody in the press from everywhere else is going to say, it's not going to work. And they're going to be right an awful lot of the time. That's an awful lot of micro-trauma. I'm splitting as we talk. But as you navigate this, it's important to recognize that you still need to give to the individuals who are in charge of your daily activities. You're not going to be able to break away. Continue to keep your nose to the grindstone. It's the nose to the grindstone, head in the clouds, as opposed to staring off and getting lost. You're an innovator, not necessarily a dreamer. Once you have a viable candidate, take advantage of those systems that excel at that slow and methodical progression. It may not be you. As an innovator, you're moving and shaking, you're trying to get in front of things, you're looking 3 steps ahead. It may not be for you, but there are institutions and agencies and academic centers and so forth that are wonderful at doing this. Hand off your project to those experts who can make it better and tweak and modify and do all that stuff that they do really well so that you can actually move on to the next project. That ADD isn't a bad thing necessarily. So let's take a little look at the future. You always want to keep your eye on the future. What if we could make our device even better? So now we've got it 3D printed with no moving parts and all of that. What if we could shrink it down to the size of a lipstick? Okay, good luck with that, engineering team. So as we look forward to the future, the other thing that I want to mention, in addition to some of the gambling references, the other references that I think you've seen throughout this are related to the space arena. Started off with that NASA collaboration, shooting for the stars, a few other types of things, but I can happily say that back in the 1990s, I had an opportunity of joining the Ohio Space Scientists of Tomorrow, and I got a behind-the-scenes look at some of the most amazing types of things. And it was that moment and that opportunity that gave me some of that innovative mindset and helped teach me some of those future-oriented impacts. Start early. Take a look at the youth and see what you can teach them because they're the innovators of tomorrow. The last thing I'd like to do is, now that I've walked you through this process and convinced you that I'm not entirely crazy, I'd like to take us just a little bit to the edge because that's where I like to live. And I'd like to say that in addition to doing this 3D printing of the ventilators and the medical supplies and so forth, or what my current project is that's bringing me here, what if we, instead of taking a common enemy like the disease process of COVID, and what if we could actually take that same collaborative model and pick another pie-in-the-sky concept that allowed us, rather than being cutthroat or competitive, to collaborate in an arena where we had a common pathway and a common goal. And it's not going to be an easy goal. What if we could do that and take a look in the space arena? And this becomes a wonderful analogy for a future where in healthcare we have the capability of not looking back at how much of some of those NASA and other space agencies' innovations have affected our patient care today, but this also gets an opportunity to say, how can we improve and navigate into a space where we're taking regular, ordinary citizens and tourists as opposed to superheroes and considering having them living in low Earth orbit or considering actually colonizing space permanently? What would that look like, and how would you get involved as an innovator very early? And this is my opportunity to tell you that there are some groups that are out there doing that. There is a group called Asgardia that is working with a number of space partners around, and I'm happily enjoying my time that I'm spending meeting those wonderful people. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I look forward to chatting to the select few of you that I haven't lost in this conversation with the next steps. Because guess what? Hot off the press, the last thing I got in here is that this space agency recognized the importance of biomedicine and just came up with an agreement, a multinational agreement with an expert group, an expert institute, taking a look at that biomedical component and seeking some of those innovators in healthcare that may help us navigate in some of those businesses that can offer some services in this arena. And I look forward to having any number of you guys jump on board because it's a fun ride. This is a wonderful group. So please, and I know I'm probably getting to the close of my time, ask me when you see me in the halls, and I will talk your ear off, if I already haven't, about some of these areas. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you. Thank you.